The message came when the world was supposed to be asleep. It lit up the cracked screen of Arvin Hale's old phone just as he finally settled his 6-year-old son into bed. The words felt like a punch he never saw coming. His boss, the woman who had given him the first stable job he'd had in years, was demanding he come to her house immediately. The tone of the message was sharp, cold, and carried an edge that made his stomach twist. He could already feel the ground beneath his feet shifting, as if the life he had worked so hard to rebuild was preparing to fall apart again. Outside, the early dawn was starting to touch the horizon, washing the neighborhood in a pale gray light that made everything feel strangely suspended, like time itself was holding its breath. And in that quiet, heavy moment, Arvin knew this night would change something forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Stories of Kindness. It truly helps keep these stories alive. Arvin had built his days around small routines meant to create a sense of stability for his son, Jace. Morning walks to school, lunch packed with whatever he could afford, late evenings spent juggling work assignments while helping with homework. It wasn't the life he imagined, but it was the life he was determined to make work. Every decision he made revolved around keeping Jace's world steady, even if his own heart felt unsteady most days. Losing his wife, Mira, to a sudden illness 2 years earlier had shaken him deeper than he liked to admit. Since then, every day had been a climb. Not loud, not dramatic, but relentless. He worked at Wendell Interiors, a modest but growing design firm owned by a woman named Corinne Vesper. She had built the business from the ground up, known for her strict standards, her sharp intuition, and the quiet compassion she hid behind her guarded expressions. People respected her, but also feared disappointing her. Arvin had been grateful when she hired him despite his patchy resume. It had been the start of something stable, maybe even hopeful. But now, here in the dim hallway of his small apartment, staring at the glowing message on his phone, all he felt was dread. He glanced at Jace sleeping softly in the next room, clutching the blanket his mother had sewn years ago. That sight steadied him. Whatever the reason Corinne was calling him, he had to face it. He found a neighbor to watch Jace, a kind older woman named Mrs. Carr, and then stepped into the faint morning light. The city was quiet, with only the distant rumble of early transport and the rhythmic sweep of a street cleaner breaking the silence. The air smelled faintly of dust and blooming jasmine from a nearby garden. Arvin walked briskly, each step heavy with questions. Had he made a mistake at work? Had someone accused him of something? He replayed the last few days over and over but found nothing obvious. Corinne's house sat at the edge of the city, surrounded by white stone walls and perfectly trimmed hedges. It looked like the kind of home that belonged to someone whose life had always been stable, someone who never had to worry about losing everything overnight. The porch light was still on, even though daylight was steadily spreading across the sky. When he reached the door, it opened before he could knock. Corinne stood there wearing a soft beige sweater and black slacks, her hair loosely tied back as if she had been awake longer than she should have been. Her eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, held something stormy. She stepped aside, allowing him in without a word. The moment he walked past her, he felt the tension in the air, almost physical. She closed the door slowly, the soft click sounding unnervingly final. And then she said it. The words cracked through the stillness, cold and disbelieving. "So it's true? You lied to me?" They were not shouted, but the quiet sting of them hit harder than any yell. Arvin's heart dropped. His throat tightened. He didn't even know what she meant, but guilt, heavy, inherited from years of hardship, rose in him instinctively. He stood still in the center of her elegant living room, the sunlight now filtering through large windows and spreading across polished wood floors. Everything around him looked fragile, expensive, untouchable. Corinne's hand trembled slightly as she held up a file. His employment file. Papers slipped out of it and fell across the coffee table like scattered accusations. She pointed to a particular document, an emergency contact form. I received a call tonight, she said, her voice low but strained. They were trying to confirm if your wife was available to pick up your child because the school listed her as the primary emergency contact. Arvin, you told me she passed away. His breath stopped. He blinked. For a moment he couldn't speak. The world seemed to tilt. Then the truth slammed into him. He had forgotten to update that one form. In the chaos of juggling grief, work, and single parenthood, he had filled that paper out during his first week on the job, before he was emotionally ready. The school had copied old records. The job had asked for emergency contacts. He had written Myra's name almost on autopilot, the way someone writes a reflex before remembering reality. He had meant to fix it. Truly. But in the storm of survival, he had forgotten. And now his boss thought he had lied. He tried to explain, but his voice kept catching, the words struggling to form. He spoke in fragments, about the confusion, about the grieving, about the forgetfulness that felt like a betrayal to Mira every time it happened. He felt exposed, ashamed, overwhelmed. The room seemed to press in on him. Corinne listened. And as he spoke, her expression shifted, softening, the storm in her eyes fading into something quieter, something like regret. She hadn't expected this kind of truth. She had expected a confession, maybe an excuse, but not the weight of a man still learning how to breathe again after losing the person he'd built his life with. She moved to the window and looked outside, the rising sunlight illuminating the tired lines on her face. She seemed to wrestle with something internal before turning back to him. Her voice was gentler now, threaded with something human rather than professional. You should have told me, not because I needed details, but because you shouldn't carry something like that alone. Those words shattered something in him. He hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding everything inside. The nights spent crying quietly so his son wouldn't hear, the mornings pretending he was fine, the constant balancing of bills, exhaustion, and fear. All of it had become second nature, a private storm he never let anyone see. Corinne walked closer. She didn't touch him, but her presence felt like an anchor he hadn't expected. She told him she had spent years pretending she didn't know loneliness, hiding it beneath her success. She revealed fragments of her own struggles, things she never shared at work. It wasn't pity, it was connection. And in the quiet morning light, something shifted between them. Not romantically, not dramatically, but profoundly. Like two people acknowledging they were both human after all. She told him she called him because she feared being tricked, misled, taken advantage of.